Hello, history enthusiasts, and welcome to History Love, the channel where the past comes alive. Here, we dive deep into the fascinating stories, pivotal events, and remarkable figures that have shaped our world. So, sit back, relax, and join us as we journey through time and bring history to life. The history of Sweden. Prehistoric Sweden before AD 800. The cradle of civilization in the north. Our story begins in the icy expanse of Scandinavia, where the glaciers of the last ice age slowly retreated, unveiling a rugged, resource-rich land around 12,000 BC. As the earth thawed, nomadic hunter-gatherers ventured into this pristine wilderness, their survival skills honed against the challenges of an unforgiving landscape. The Stone Age. These early settlers thrived along Sweden's coasts, relying on fishing, hunting, and foraging. By 4000 BC, a significant shift occurred, the arrival of agriculture. With the introduction of farming, people began establishing permanent settlements, and a vibrant Neolithic culture emerged. Intricate stone tools, pottery, and burial mounds testify to the growing complexity of these early communities. Bronze and Iron Ages. By the Bronze Age, circa 1700 to 500 BC, Swedish society had begun to trade extensively. Bronze artifacts unearthed in burial sites suggest connections with distant lands, including Central Europe. The sun cult flourished, symbolized by rock carvings depicting solar motifs and longships, foreshadowing Sweden's seafaring future. The Iron Age, 500 BC AD 800, brought further transformations. Iron tools revolutionized agriculture and warfare, while hillforts dotted the landscape, reflecting growing social hierarchies and the need for defense. These centuries laid the groundwork for Sweden's rise as a formidable power. Viking period and Middle Ages. 800–1500. The Viking Age. Raiders, traders, and explorers. Around AD 800, Sweden entered the Viking Age, a defining era of exploration, conquest, and cultural exchange. Swedish Vikings, known as the Russ, set sail not westward like their Danish and Norwegian counterparts, but eastward, navigating the great rivers of Eastern Europe. They established trade routes linking Scandinavia to the Byzantine Empire and the Islamic Caliphates, bringing silver, spices, and exotic goods back to their homeland. Swedish Vikings played a pivotal role in founding early Russian states, with their name inspiring the term, Russia. At home, the Viking chieftains ruled over loosely organized communities, their power symbolized by massive burial mounds and rune stones that still stand today. Christianization and kingdom formation. The 11th century saw the gradual Christianization of Sweden. Missionaries, kings, and local rulers adopted the new faith, integrating Sweden into the broader European Christian community. The transition was not without conflict, as pagan traditions clashed with Christian doctrines. By the reign of King Olaf Skotkonung, who minted Sweden's first coins around 995 AD, Christianity had taken root. In the 12th and 13th centuries, the Swedish kingdom began to consolidate. The monarchy strengthened its hold over the fragmented regions, and laws were codified to unify the realm. This period also saw the rise of Stockholm, which became Sweden's economic and political center. The Kalmar Union and struggles for independence. By the late Middle Ages, Sweden faced external and internal challenges. In 1397, Queen Margaret I united Sweden, Denmark, and Norway under the Kalmar Union, a bid to counter German influence in the Baltic. While the union promised strength, it often led to friction. Swedish nobles resented Danish dominance, and repeated uprisings, such as Ingilbrecht Ingilbrektson's revolt in 1434, highlighted the kingdom's deep divisions. The most infamous moment came in 1520 with the Stockholm bloodbath, when Christian II of Denmark executed Swedish nobles, igniting widespread rebellion. This act would set the stage for Sweden's break from the Union and its emergence as a powerful independent state. Early modern Sweden. 1523 to 1611. The Vasa era and the birth of modern Sweden. The early 16th century marked a seismic shift as Gustav Vasa ascended the throne in 1523, establishing Sweden as an independent nation-state. His reign was transformative. Vasa centralized royal authority, crushed remaining resistance, and ushered in the Protestant Reformation. Lutheranism became the state religion, and the wealth of the Catholic Church was seized, funding the crown and reshaping Swedish society. Military expansion and Baltic dominance. Under Vasa's successors, Sweden began asserting itself as a regional power. The late 16th century saw wars with Denmark, Russia, and Poland over control of the Baltic. Sweden's ambitions were fueled by its burgeoning military might and economic growth. Cultural and political foundations. The Vasa dynasty also laid the groundwork for Sweden's cultural renaissance. Universities were established, trade flourished, and the Swedish language gained prominence in administration and literature. This period set the stage for the Swedish Empire of the 17th century. Sweden as a great power. 1648 to 1721. The Age of Empire. The mid-17th century marked the height of Sweden's influence as a formidable European power. Emerging from the 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648, with significant territorial gains, Sweden's dominance was sealed by the Treaty of Westphalia in 1648. The rise of the Swedish Empire. Sweden's victories in the 30 Years' War positioned it as the leading Protestant force in Europe. Territories like Pomerania, Bremen, and parts of northern Germany expanded Swedish influence along the Baltic Sea, transforming it into a Swedish lake. These lands became essential for trade and military logistics, cementing Sweden's role as a key player in European geopolitics. A militarized nation. Under the leadership of visionary monarchs like Gustavus Adolphus and later his successors, Sweden became known for its well-organized and disciplined military. The conscription system, combined with innovative tactics, allowed Sweden to punch above its weight. The Karelians, elite Swedish soldiers, became a symbol of the nation's might. Internal reforms and cultural growth. Domestically, Sweden's golden age was not just about conquest. Leaders like Queen Christina fostered intellectual and artistic growth, making Stockholm a hub for Enlightenment thought. However, the focus on military expansion drained resources, leading to economic hardships for the peasantry and widening social divides. The Great Northern War, 1700 to 1721, the fall from glory. By the dawn of the 18th century, cracks in Sweden's empire began to show. While the nation still commanded respect, its dominance was challenged by the rise of powerful neighbors, particularly Russia under Peter the Great. The war begins. In 1700, a coalition of Russia, Denmark, Norway, and Poland-Lithuania launched a coordinated assault on Sweden, seeking to dismantle its empire. This conflict, known as the Great Northern War, would become one of the most defining and devastating chapters in Swedish history. The leadership of Charles XII, Sweden's young and charismatic king, Charles XII, rose to the challenge. His early victories, such as the stunning triumph at Narva in 1700, showcased his military genius. However, his ambitious campaigns stretched Sweden's resources to the breaking point. The turning point. Poltava, 1709. The war's tide shifted dramatically in 1709 at the Battle of Poltava, where Swedish forces suffered a catastrophic defeat against Russia. Charles XII's invasion of Russian territory ended in disaster, forcing him into exile in the Ottoman Empire. The loss at Poltava marked the beginning of Sweden's decline as a great power. The end of the war. The war dragged on until 1721, culminating in the Treaty of Nystad, where Sweden ceded vast territories, including Estonia, Livonia, and parts of Finland, to Russia. The once dominant empire was reduced to a shadow of its former self, and Russia emerged as the new powerhouse of the Baltic. The Enlightenment. Sweden's cultural rebirth. With the loss of its empire, Sweden shifted its focus inward, embracing the cultural and intellectual movements of the Enlightenment. Reforms and new governance. The defeat in the Great Northern War led to political upheaval. The power of the monarchy was curtailed, and a new parliamentary system emerged during the Age of Liberty, 1718 to 1772. Sweden became a beacon of democratic reform, with intellectuals and scientists influencing European thought. Linnaeus and the Age of Discovery. One of the most celebrated figures of this era was Carl Linnaeus, the father of modern taxonomy. His work revolutionized biology and symbolized Sweden's contributions to global science. Explorers and scholars, inspired by Enlightenment ideals, brought Sweden into the intellectual forefront. Cultural Renaissance. Art, literature, and architecture flourished during this period. Figures like Anders Celsius, inventor of the temperature scale, and Emanuel Swedenborg, philosopher and scientist, exemplified the era's spirit of inquiry and innovation. 19th century. Transformation and challenges. Gustavian era. Late 18th, early 19th century. The 19th century began under the shadow of the Gustavian era, a time of reform and absolute monarchy initiated by King Gustav III. His assassination in 1792 left the country in political turmoil, and Sweden grappled with internal struggles and external threats as Europe was swept by Napoleonic wars and revolutionary ideals. Loss of Finland. 1809. One of the most defining moments of the era was the Finnish War, 1808 to 1809. Sweden's defeat by Russia resulted in the loss of Finland, which had been part of the Swedish realm for centuries. The 1809 Treaty of Frederikshamn ceded Finland to Russia, profoundly altering Sweden's territorial and emotional identity. Internally, this loss triggered constitutional reform, introducing a separation of powers and ending the era of absolute monarchy. Union with Norway. 1814. After the Napoleonic Wars, Sweden turned its attention to the West. In 1814, through the Treaty of Kiel and a brief military campaign, Sweden entered a union with Norway. While Norway retained significant autonomy, the arrangement brought a measure of stability to Sweden, which had lost its great power status. Modernization of Sweden. 1860 to 1910. The latter half of the 19th century saw profound modernization. Industrialization began reshaping Swedish society, with railways, factories, and urbanization transforming the economy. Innovations in agriculture reduced rural poverty, while political reforms expanded suffrage and laid the groundwork for democratic governance. Health and social reforms. Sweden's public health improved dramatically during this period. Advances in medicine, sanitation, and public education reduced mortality rates and laid the foundation for a robust welfare system. Vaccination campaigns and healthcare accessibility became priorities, reflecting the nation's commitment to well-being. 20th century. Neutrality, welfare, and prosperity. Sweden in World War I. Sweden maintained neutrality during World War I, 1914 to 1918. Although spared the devastation of the trenches, the country faced economic difficulties due to blockades and shortages. Post-war, Sweden capitalized on its neutrality to expand trade and industrial production. Industrialization. 1910 to 1939. The early 20th century saw Sweden's industrial boom. Key industries like steel, timber, and engineering thrived. Companies like SKF, ball bearings, and Electrolux, appliances, became global leaders, while urban centers like Stockholm and Gothenburg grew rapidly. The welfare state. During the interwar years, Sweden began constructing the foundations of its renowned welfare state. Landmark reforms in education, healthcare, and workers' rights created a system of social security that became a model for the world. The Swedish Social Democratic Party, which dominated politics for much of the century, championed these reforms. Foreign policy. 1920 to 1939. Sweden maintained a policy of neutrality between the wars, focusing on diplomacy and trade. Joining the League of Nations in 1920 reflected its commitment to collective security, even as global tensions escalated in the 1930s. Sweden during World War II. Once again, Sweden remained neutral during World War II, 1939 to 1945. However, neutrality required complex diplomacy. Sweden allowed German troop transit early in the war while covertly supporting Allied intelligence and resistance movements. The country's decision to protect and shelter Danish Jews during the Holocaust remains a proud moment in its history. Post-war Sweden. After the war, Sweden emerged as a prosperous and progressive nation. The post-war era saw the rise of the Swedish model, characterized by a mixed economy, universal welfare, and high living standards. By the 1960s, Sweden was a global leader in innovation, design, and human rights advocacy. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more fascinating stories from the past. Until next time, keep the love for history alive.